the privilege of only a minuscule minority. This work comes from the desk of one such participant who saw it unfolding in front of his own eyes. This is the first-hand story of one of the most audacious operations undertaken in the history of military aviation. The success of this very operation enabled the Indian Army to achieve what, incidentally, had not been planned in the first place. This is a treasure trove of some very rare and unique first-hand accounts from the senior-most officer in the core area of operations to the cutting-edge subunit commanders. There is no parallel work of this nature in existence as of this date. I will now invite this decorated panel and the speakers on the stage. Chandrakant Singh ji is a veteran of the Bangladesh Liberation War, in which he was wounded and received the Vir Chakra for his gallantry. He is now an acknowledged writer and speaker on military history and travel-related subjects. In the past year, he has published 2 books, Cavalier in the Sky, the biography of Air Marshal Chandan Singh, and Magna, River of Victory, a definitive account of the defining battle of the Liberation War. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite on stage Chandrakant Singh, Lieutenant General S.S. Mehta, Wing Commander Krishnamurti, and General Chouhan. Ladies and gentlemen, that indeed is a decorated panel up here on stage. You can welcome them with some applause and more. Okay, yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I think it's okay. You don't cover this cover, yeah. No, something is here. Okay. Okay, book cover. Okay. Got something here. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been privileged to be here and listen. Does it work? Okay. You want it closer? So far, we've been privileged, 4 Nobel laureates, great writers, speakers like Shashi Tharoor and others, great commentators on history and human condition. This is the first time you are going to see not commentators, but the people who made history. Before I introduce the panelists, one of the misconceptions that is prevalent in India is that Mahatma Gandhi was a pacifist and believed in ahimsa. I would request you to read what he said in Navsari in 1921. You can see it in the panel. See what he has to say. What should I say about India's contribution to the history of the world? We've had a glorious past. We should show ourselves as great as our forefathers. Colonel Todd tells us that whereas in Europe there was one thermoplasty, in India we find every street and lane to have been a thermoplasty. He continues, Gandhi, I shall not go into the history to tell you what great heroes India has produced. I shall say this, let us place our hands on our hearts and ask ourselves whether we have that heroism in us today. Mahatma Gandhi at Navsari in 1921. Let the future generations judge whether those of us who were at the Magna on 9th of December 1971 lived up to Bapu's expectations. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have heard of Waterloo, Panipat, and Plassey? Will you please raise your hands? Virtually everyone. before today, or maybe a couple of days earlier, except for General Sagat's daughter, who's named after this river, Meghna, how many of you had heard of the Battle of Meghna? Well, a few do. The way you did. And Rajesh, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not exaggerating. This year, according to the Indian calendar, Vikram calendar, is 2079. The Vikram's calendar starts off in 79 BC, which marks the defeat of the Huns in northern Punjab by Saliwahan. That is how our calendar starts off. Since then, to the present day, India has not seen a victory like the victory at the Meghna. To put it to you shortly, the battle for the crossing of the Meghna started off on the 9th of December at 4 p.m., exactly this time. Ended at 4 a.m. on the 10th of December. At 10 a.m. on the 10th of December, Niazi sent a message to Yahya Khan that he has no option left. Either Niazi arranges a ceasefire or he will have to surrender. Overnight, the tables were turned on Pakistan, thanks to this battle. And the sad part is, 50 years of the battle, so few of us still know of it. I want to introduce to you the panelists. Can I have the next slide? Next one. Next. Next. Oh my God. The next slide, please. Okay, it doesn't matter. On my left is General Satish Mehta. We spent the entire war together. As an infantryman, I was saved marching through a lot of mud because I kept on sitting on top of his tank. And there were times when we were shot up by anti-tank weapons. I have no hesitation in telling you that his role in the victory is immense, undocumented, unreported. We had crossed the Meghna River by helicopters. We didn't have any tanks of our own. We had hardly any artillery and anti-tank weapons. We knew the enemy had tanks. And if they had been aggressive, they would have wiped us out. We were deep behind enemy lines. On the 14th of December, he crossed the Meghna River. These tanks were amphibious tanks designed to cross European rivers 100 meters wide. The river here was 16 miles wide. And he joined up with us on the 14th of December outside Dhaka. When the Pakistanis saw that the tanks have arrived, the artillery has arrived, infantry has arrived, they had no option but to seek for a ceasefire and eventual surrender. On his left, ladies and gentlemen, you must have seen that famous surrender photograph of the signature of the surrender. How many have you seen that photograph? Good. You will notice there's one officer, young man, handsome young chap, pushing General Jacob aside to have a look at the surrender document. How many have seen that? Well, some of you, he's the culprit. He was a 23-year-old, 23 or 24? 24-year-old helicopter pilot. This victory was achieved because of these pilots. To put it into context, we had a total of 10 or 12 helicopters. Instructions or clearances that had been obtained to lift only 120 men for any operation. These young boys lifted 6,000 troops and 6,000 tons of stores in it, where sanction had been only for 120 men. They were all 20-year-olds. And that's what broke the Pakistani back. The more remarkable thing is every day you hear of helicopter crashes. Here they flew over 1,000 sorties in enemy territory at night without sophisticated instrumental for navigation aids, with no proper places to land, and they did not have one accident. Though the helicopters were shot by the Pakistanis, they had some people wounded, but they retrieved those helicopters. The other thing about the victory, I'm not going to go in, we don't have the time to go into details about the war or about this whole battle. We not only won the war, most importantly, we won the peace. The Americans entered Afghanistan, remained in 20 years, and is Afghanistan a peaceful country? The answer is no. Same thing in Iraq. Americans have stayed there. I think they're still hanging around. Is it a peaceful country? The answer is no. The Pakistanis surrendered on the 16th of December. On the 22nd of December, that is exactly 1 week later, the Bangladesh government in exile under Mr. Tajuddin Ali Ahmed arrived there. General Sagat handed over the keys of Dhaka and the Bangladesh government to the Bangladeshi government and told them, this is your country, you are to govern it. We are not an occupation army. We will help you if you ask us for help. And no country has left a conquered country or a liberated country that fast as we did. And the man responsible for it was General Sagat, who handed over the keys. There were elements in our Indian establishment who wanted to have a military government headed by us in Bangladesh, which would have been a tragedy. But the commanding general in that area, General Sagat, said, no, that would be a tragedy for us and the newly liberated people. We don't want to replace the Pakistanis. We will hand over the government to the Bangladeshis. His family is here. Will you please get up? His father and the ladies, their grandfather, is the true hero of Bangladesh. I assure you, and I say it with full authority of having been on the ground myself, more than Aurora, more than anybody else, the man who got us victory was General Sagat Singh. Other thing is, ladies and gentlemen, this was not my victory or General Satish Mehta's victory or Krishnamurti's victory. This was a victory of all Indians, including you all. When I say you all, you'll be surprised. How many of you are from Rajasthan here? Well, a very large number. Do you know the most influential people in that area, the commanding generals who succeeded, were all from Rajasthan? General Sagat Singh, Air Marshal Chandan Singh, and General Himmat Singh. Any questions about that? So that is your connection. They are with the soil. And not only them who fought. Is Sam here? Sam Dalrymple? Yes. Sam, will you get up? Willie Dalrymple's son. He said, what connection does he have with us? An ancestor of his was a commanding general of my battalion in the Second Burma War in 1880. And from his mother's side, Sam, just please get up. Olivia's side, an ancestor of hers, Alexander Fraser, also served in my battalion. He has it. But the biggest culprit and original terrorist is his father, Sanjoy's father, Admiral Mayor Roy. He is the one who carried out those strikes on the Chittagong harbor and sunk a whole 100,000 tons of shipping, Pakistani shipping. So you're in the company of a terrorist family. Sanjoy. So all of us, if you look at it, it is your connection, it is your war, every Indian's war. The Russians, with all their power, have been in Ukraine for 2 weeks. Have they succeeded? We won the war. We officially started on the 14th. 16th was the surrender. In 12 days, the whole show was over. We won it. Who's done it? I hand over the mic to General Mehta, who will give you a wider picture.
Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I want to thank the organizers. Mr. Roy is here. for ensuring that a book like Meghna gets launched. Then I want to thank Chandrakant for putting it together. If you get a chance to read the book, it is not history. It is statements made by those who participating in person, and it is recaptured that. Of course, the colleague here on my left and the serving officer, Gen Chouhan. I am not here to tell you about the war, but I want to tell you 4 or 5 things which I want you to remember and pass on to the others. First, how many of you remember the war in 1962 when we lost to the Chinese? Raise your hands. And how many of you remember 1971 when we beat the Pakistanis? Many more. I come here all the way from Pune to tell you this, that we do not know the value of victory and we do not know how to celebrate victory. Why should 71 be celebrated? Because of 4 reasons. First, it was a victory of democracy over military rule. You and I represent a democracy. Why a democracy is victorious over military rule? Because in a democracy, the common man, the talent of the armed forces, and the political class, when they get their act together, they're unbeatable. The only tragedy is that military rules, authoritarian rules, just don't know about this. Democracies will always win because you, your predecessors, your children will always be part of it. The second reason why I'm here to talk about the war is not exactly our contribution that you could read in the book. The second is, it was a victory of humanism over barbarism. Our neighbor Bangladesh was under a genocide attack. Women were being raped. Industrials were being killed. The leadership was being slaughtered. The intellectuals were put to shelf. When this was happening, India made a call by a political class to make what I call a humanitarian intervention. There is no example in the history of warfare in the 20th century where any country has gone to the help of another country for a humanitarian intervention with the purpose of saving a neighbor from a genocide. When you live in a house and there's rape happening in your neighbor, you have to go to help. And when we went to the world asking for it, as is happening now between Ukraine and the rest of the world, everybody is saying Russia is the aggressor. But when you went in, nobody was willing to raise their hand to say Pakistan is the aggressor. It was a victory of humanism over barbarism. The third reason, which Chandrakant mentioned, is it was a victory of liberation over occupation. We did not go to Bangladesh to occupy their territory. We went them to liberate from genocide. And what you need to know is that the genocide that was going on would have been endless had there not been any intervention. And you and I talk about cricket matches and hockey matches and football matches when we play each other and who wins and who loses. Just please remember, it is in Bangladesh, when we were sitting in the outskirts of Dhaka, that 30,000 entrenched Pakistanis, entrenched and prepared in their positions with tanks and minefields, surrendered to 3,000 of us at the ratio of 10:1. This did not happen because we were brave. This happened because the whole country was with us. And they lost 30,000 because their country was not with them. And it should not be forgotten by anyone, whoever talks about anything, is that our contribution in liberating Bangladesh at that time, a huge contribution should go to Mukti Bahini. Mukti Bahini were the fighters who in a democratically elected or democratically held constitution were not allowed to handle power. They came to the streets, they became our eyes and ears, they were strong-willed. It does not matter they were men, women, children, anybody else. They contributed and they contributed and they contributed. And as a result of that, it was possible for the armed forces to get down and resolve the problem of a genocide that was taking place at that time. And last but not the least, there's a notion in people's minds that religious wars are only religious. Who was fighting? Pakistan was fighting Bangladeshis belonging to the same religion. And yet genocide. And nobody coming to the rescue. The Americans saying we'll move the 7th fleet. China was smarting. Yet it happened because democracies cannot lose. And the last word that I want to say, because I know time is running out and there are many others who want to say something, is it? And this I want you to remember and pass on as a legacy for yourself. We have a tourism logo that talks of incredible India. I want to tell you, I was then a 27-year-old. I had a 1-year-old son who's now a brigadier commander. Rohit, get up. He was a 1-year-old when I went to war. Please sit down. And his wife is with him. I want to tell you that incredible India is invincible India whenever we are Team India. Don't ever forget that. Make sure you pass it on to your progeny. Make sure it is the talk of the town. Not many people in the Lit Fest want to attend this function because we're talking the real world. We are not talking about what may be, what may not be, what may happen, what could happen. We sit here in front of you, tell you what happened. We sit here in front of you to tell you that when it comes to your nation and nation state, my country, right or wrong, nothing else matters. And if that is going to be your logo and that is going to be a representation to your children and your generations, whether through this, whether Mr. Roy's D-Lit festival that will go on year after year, it is important for India to understand that unless victory is celebrated, people will not understand the meaning of victory. They will not understand the meaning of celebration. It is easy to say so-and-so is my enemy. But when you trounce the enemy in his own turf, in a manner that nobody in the history has done before, you're seeing what is happening in Ukraine. We did not kill civilians. We did not bombard civilians. We walked in, we walked out. We got the help of Mukti Bahini and we gave that country a situation and a position today where Bangladesh today is a beautiful Sonar Bangla democracy running alongside us, along the river Meghna. Hopefully, that much and more. And that's my message to you. Please pass it on. Please convey it to whoever you can speak to. God bless you.
Krutz, just a minute. When the general said, my country, I want to add to it, my country and my people, that is you, are included. This holy land, sacred land, and the people who are called this land their homeland. You are as much a part of that country, and it is your defense forces who will shed their last drop of blood to protect you.
Good evening. In these days of ODI and IPL matches, I want to give a parallel of 1971 war that someone told me we won by an innings and 93,000 runs. I hope you are getting them. Meaning, one innings and 93,000 runs. Okay. And Major Chandrakant has been very kind to say that we did a wonderful job. We had been with General Sagat from the month of March, right since the time Operation Searchlight was on in Bangladesh. We were in a place called Silchar. Those who are aware of Assam geography, they will know where is Silchar. And we have been flying day in and day out with them. So when we went inside Bangladesh, on the declaration of war, we didn't find any difference. But that does not give us a special privilege to say that we could fly without instruments, without night landing facilities, and do what? Mind you, the entire credit goes not to the pilots, but to the engineers and maintenance people who are with us in the open air to do the maintenance and keep the aircraft straight. Cattle class helicopter it was, no doubt. Mi-4 helicopter was 1962, it came to India, 1971, we fought the war. And we had the guts, we had the professionalism, and we had the command of Chandan Singh, we had the command of Sagat Singh to say, yes, we will do what we want to do. Jai.
Just a minute. General, would you?
I should have mentioned, but I thought a part of the battle needs to be known to you. Why General Sagat Singh? When we reached a particular point in what is now Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, a major bridge that was linking us and Dhaka was blown up by the enemy in our face. We were 400 yards away from when the bridge was blown up. General Sagat Singh was in a Y junction. He had two choices. His orders were to stop if the bridge is blown on the riverside. But his mind was saying that this is not what I'm going to do. I am going to Dhaka. Here is a man who had the intellect and the operational command because of his former experiences to say, unless I get to the center of gravity of this country, which is Dhaka, I am not going to liberate it. Please try and understand that if he had not captured Dhaka, there would have been partial liberation. If Bangladesh was partially liberated, what would have been the state today? They would have been still fighting the war. And therefore, the credit to him to be on a Y junction and do it, credit to him and his then commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Himmat Singh, also from Jaipur, who took a battalion and went across helicopters provided by them. I was commanding a tank squadron. Now, tanks were amphibious. But when you look at the Meghna, it was 8 miles wide. I couldn't see the other bank. How do you cross it? It is made for European rivers where you're 200 yards wide. However, we find a way to cross it, and we crossed it, and that now is history. And the point that I want to make to you is that when the decision was taken by General Sagat Singh that we will go to Dhaka, every man in India up and down the chain supported it. The army commander in Calcutta, the Director General Military Operations in Delhi, General Gill, the Chief of the Army Staff then, General Manekshaw, the Raksha Mantri, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Office, everybody went into the support. And one of the reasons the Russians supported us, because we had signed as a result of a diplomatic coup, a treaty with the Russians on 7th of August 1971 to say if anybody enters this war, then they will also pick up arms and do what they need to do. And that's what helped. And therefore, as a result of this, we were where we were. And this must not be forgotten, that when a good thing is happening, the whole country gets together. And that's what I said. Team India is invincible. Chouhan.
Good evening to everybody. It's a singular honor to be here today to launch a book written by a veteran who belongs to my regiment, the Brigade of the Guards. And I think today every guardsman would be proud of him that he's given such a vivid account of a very important operation of our military history. And we have recently finished celebration of the Swarnim Vijay Varsh, wherein we have celebrated this complete 1971 war operations and our victory, which was very decisive. I am nobody to comment on anything add to this operation or what has been written by Major Chandrakant in the book, because we have such a distinguished veteran panels over here who themselves were there on ground and fought the operations. Only thing when I was glancing through the book, I find that it was one of the very classical joint operations that was conducted way back in 1971. And today, so much of emphasis on joint operations. I think even in those days, way back in 71, our armed forces were very capable of carrying out very successful joint operations. My congratulations to Major Chandrakant for having written such a wonderful book, and my sincere compliments to him. I'm sure he has put in a lot of hard work. Jai Hind.
Any questions? Okay, 2 questions, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, please. Yeah.
We are all very proud of our armed forces, and every time our armed forces since independence have done Indian public proud. We are all very proud of you. Sir, just a little digression from this. I just wanted to ask, after we won the war and liberated Bangladesh, do you armed forces feel disappointed that we lost out on the negotiating table with Bhutto, the negotiations happened and we could not solve our own issues.
I
Kashmir and everything.
get your question. There are two parts to this question. One is the return of prisoners of war. Under the Geneva Convention, of which we are signatories, we actually had held the prisoners of war for longer than needed. Yes, we could have bargained for a better resolution of the J&K problem and made them sign that paper. We slipped up there. Second question. Yes, sir.
My question is that 1971 के अंदर हमारे पास टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं थी, वाईफाई नहीं था, मोबाइल नहीं था, तो आप लोग कैसे कम्युनिकेशन करते थे?
भैया,
कैसे आप जो है प्लानिंग बनाते थे?
You see, we had radio sets, we had telephone systems, and let's go back. Did Alexander have a Wi-Fi system? He came all the way from Greece to here. We have runners, physical men carrying messages from one to another. Where there's a will, you will always find a way. And we found a way there to bypass the complex signal codes and other things. Thank you very much. We are over time. Sorry. Sir. Will you sign the book?
Ladies and gentlemen, we rise up in salute to these decorated men of our armed forces. The narration of their stories tells us about the human behind the soldier and so much more. We are thankful to them for their constant service to the nation as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Chandrakant Singh, Lieutenant General S.S. Mehta, Wing Commander Krishnamurti in conversation with General Chouhan, Meghna, the river of victory.
You're not doing it one mala.
We request them to accept a small token of our love and appreciation. And please note that Chandrakant Singh ji will be signing his book there. There's a yellow tent, a very cute yellow tent, turmeric-looking yellow tent behind the front lawn, beside the bookstore, beside the AV panel where he'll be there to sign his book. So all your questions can be directed to him over there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being. We'll be back with our next session, performance poetry, very, very shortly in the next 8 to 9 minutes. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ah